But this hour, we're looking at the presidential campaign, and my guest in studio is David Parker. David Parker is no stranger to the program, been on before. His new book, On the Brink, America's Choice 2012, is not written by a professional pundit, prognosticator, reporter. David Parker is a businessman, but he felt compelled to write down what he knows about Mitt Romney and about this race. And onthebrink2012.com is where you can get the book. You can get it on Amazon. It's linked at HughHewitt.com. David Parker, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thank you, Hugh. It's good to be here.
Let's start by telling people your background. I always embarrass my guests, but it's important for credibility purposes. They know what you've done. You're a very successful businessman. Would you run people through your career?
My background's investment banking, private equity. It's what I've done for 38 years. Global finance for nearly 28 years, and then 10 years in the private equity space thereafter.
And explain to people, since private equity is a dirty word in some people's minds after the last 6 months of the president banging on Bain, what private equity is.
Private equity is just what it connotes. It's private capital being invested in business. You can ramp it from a small enterprise to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, but it's private capital that's invested in enterprise to make it better, to make it bigger, to make it more successful. And
you've been very successful. You also call yourself a serial entrepreneur.
That's correct.
That means lots of businesses that you've begun, invested in, helped pilot.
That's exactly right.
Across what kind of fields?
It's been opportunistically driven, from banking to technology to customer service to real estate. Across the board, it's been a pretty broad spectrum.
And did you know Mitt Romney when he was running Bain Capital, or is it more recent?
Did not. I got to know Mitt back in 2005.
Okay, so the whole Bain Capital, what did you think of Bain Capital before you got to know Mitt Romney?
My only regret in life is I didn't invest in it.
We all have that regret. But was his reputation everywhere?
It was and still is stellar. Anyone who had invested in Bain Capital in 1984 with $1,000 would have ended up with $36 million at the end of the day. The returns have been phenomenal in Bain Capital.
That's right. I didn't know that.
Oh,
that's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, you take Mitt Romney, you take even Warren Buffett, who's taken public equity in investments. They've had tremendous success.
Now, I assume in the world of private equity that reputations get around. For example, in the world of broadcast journalism, we all have our reputations. It's not necessarily what people say over the air. We all know what our colleagues think of us. We all know whether or not people welcome us coming to town. We all have our reputation. In the world of private equity, is the same true?
Absolutely. You're known for who you are.
And so what was Romney's reputation before you got to know him from Bain Capital?
He was unique in the industry. One being at the very beginning of the industry, establishing the industry. But he was unique in a sense, and I'm not going to say anything about other firms, but Bain reflected Mitt Romney. And Mitt Romney's reputation was and is in that space, bar none, top of the pile.
All right. Now, 7 years ago, you get connected with him. How does that happen?
Through a mutual friend, actually through Spencer Swick.
His chief fundraiser.
Chief fundraiser.
We call him his sixth son.
That's exactly right. He's the adopted sixth son. I'm not sure Craig and Jan will appreciate that as Spencer's parents, but I got to know Spencer and his family, and by and through that, I got to know Mitt and Ann just as they were considering the presidential run in 2008.
Now, a book like On the Brink has to proceed from personal knowledge as well as research. So a lot of people want to know, describe the relationship with Romney. How well do you know him? How much time have you spent him? In which circumstances have you spent that time?
Well, the relationship with the Romneys is a friendship, and it extends beyond Mitt and Ann. It extends to their boys. It extends to Mitt's siblings and to Ann's siblings. So it's a fairly solid friendship and relationship. That said, the guy's a busy guy, and he's doing a lot of things. So we've seen him in public and private moments. It's a kind and tender relationship. But it's also a professional relationship, so it's a little of both.
Now, when you, I don't even know if you told him you were writing On the Brink. I didn't get when I was writing Mormon in the White House 6 years ago, I didn't get exactly welcome to Boston with pop guns. Come on in, let's sit down. It took a little pushing to get in the door. What'd they think about the project?
Well, actually, Mitt's brothers-in-law know well about the project. Rod and Jim know about it. I've talked to them about it. there are others around the campaign that know this is actually probably going to be somewhat of a surprise for Mitt. But I think it'll be a pleasant surprise for him.
Okay, why did you, I mean, you're a busy guy. You don't have to do this. There are other books out there, lots of pundits working. Why sit down and spend the time? And it took a lot of time to write On the Brink.
Serious concern and frustration with where we are. Not necessarily, of course, where we are as a nation, but where we are as a population that fails to understand the significance of where we are as a country and what we are facing as a country. And getting the intent of this was to wake people up.
Well, the Wake Up America is a line in the book.
Exactly right. This is a wake-up call.
And so how do you want to communicate to the radio audience where you think is a very successful investor? And by the way, I think it's important. Father of 6, grandfather of 17?
Yep, soon to be 18.
Soon to be 18. So where do you think the country is right now?
Well, the book was written to basically say, where are we? How did we get here? Why did we get here? And how do we get out? And who's going to get us out? And that really is the key. And we have a choice between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. We better know who they are and know what their capacity is to get us out. But where we are, if we do not change our current course in November 6, 2012, if we do not change the current course, we are beyond the brink. That's why the name of the book is On the Brink. We are beyond the brink, and we will not be. I do not believe the country can be saved if we don't make the change. That's
David Parker, what's that mean, though? Bring it down. I've heard lots of people say, most important election in my lifetime. I've heard that for a lot of years. Why is this that, and how do you bring it down to the guy who's driving a truck right now? He's on the long-distance haul, and he's moving through Georgia, and he's going to San Antonio, and he listens to me at stations along the way. What does that mean?
Well, I begin the book with a preamble. It's a ponderable about democracy. And I quote Alexander Tytler, who is a Scottish professor back in the late 1700s, who studied the Athenian Republic and democracy and the cycles we go through.
The 8 stages.
That's exactly right. And I think that probably says it all. That tells us where we are. Just to give you, it's from bondage to spiritual faith, from faith to courage, from courage to liberty, liberty to abundance. We've gone through all that as a nation. We're an abundant nation, far beyond any in the world. And then we go from abundance to complacency, and we're in that stage, well entrenched. And then we go from complacency to apathy, and that's where I think we are as a nation, and that's what scares me, because when we pass the next stage, it's apathy to dependence. And if there is anyone who is trying to purchase society and make us a dependent society, it is the current administration, and that is a frightening thought.
Explain what happens after dependence.
We go from dependency back to bondage.
Right, and it's about 200-year cycle? Is that what the professor estimated that you cite?
That's exactly right.
All right, so there's some historical antecedents for that. There are also some exceptions to that rule, but you are concerned that not caring about where we are right now will lead inexorably to the expansion of dependency, and from dependency to a loss of freedom. That's
exactly right. I mean, the statement's been said. Anytime voters discover they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury, we've got a problem. And that's exactly where we are as a nation.
Now, you are a very sophisticated investor. That's why I had you start with this. You know international finance. You know how it works. You worked abroad for a number of years doing capital markets. You know how capital works.
Right.
How precarious is the dollar? Because I think that's the one thing people understand, is that we just can't keep printing money at this level, or bad things are going to happen to the dollar.
Exactly right. And you have competing interests to diminish the dollar even further. And the dollar is the fundamental backbone of our economy. And if we don't have a vibrant and sustainable economy, who will?
So what do you think is the first manifestation of crisis if it's not turned around in November? Is it hyperinflation? Is it stagnation? What is it?
You know, it's an interesting question, because I've heard arguments on both sides. We don't need to. In fact, I was up in Montana at a conference and listening to a number of economists on both sides of the aisle, and it was kind of interesting. And I listened to one gal, and I'll leave her name quiet at this point, but she said, we don't have to worry about inflation. Inflation is not a concern. Now, she leans a little bit on the left side of the equation, but inflation's not a concern. I'm thinking to myself, really? How can you say that that's not the case? If you think about where we are, in fact, we were going through this whole dialogue from an economic standpoint, fiscal policy.
That's nuts.
How do we sit there and say, how much room does the Fed have? What are interest rates today?
I'll be right back with David Parker. His new book, On the Brink, America's Choice 2012, is linked at HughHewitt.com. Stay there. 21 minutes after the hour, America's Hugh Hewitt with David Parker in studio. Brad Thor coming up next hour. David is a serial entrepreneur, very successful investor, friend of Mitt Romney, author of the brand new book, On the Brink, America's Choice 2012. It's linked at HughHewitt.com. It's also available from the website, onthebrink2012.com. David Parker, we went to break. We were talking about a conference that you're at in Montana where one of the economists just said, don't worry about inflation. You and I were talking about page 18 in your book says something has to change. And that means that we cannot consider stability as an option. We're either going to retrench and go backwards towards the Republican ideal of liberty, or we're going to go forward towards socialism, because you can't keep this where we are right now, balanced between the two systems.
That's exactly right. There is no standing still. You either progress or you regress. And we're in a position that we have to make a choice. And this is a pivotal moment. This is an inflection point in our history. We are going to make a choice. We're going to continue down the path of socialism, which is where we are and where we're going, or we're going to say liberty and freedom is too important.
Now, what was interesting to me earlier this week, the market rallied, and some of the analysts were saying the market was beginning to price in a Mitt Romney win.
That's exactly right.
And I took some comfort in that and began to think, the market's pretty smart about this, and I'm feeling pretty good about this election because I just can't imagine reelecting incompetence on this epic a scale. But do you share that optimism, or are you worried that we're going to become too optimistic about winning this?
Well, I think we have to be a little bit careful. We cannot sit here and take a position and be accepting this is a slam dunk or pig iron underwater. That's just not the case. This is going to be a hard-fought battle without any question. This is going to be bare-knuckle fighting in every respect. I wouldn't expect any less out of Barack Obama. But I am of the opinion, and I do agree with the markets, and I look forward to a great 2013. I believe there will be a huge uplift in the market with the capital that's sitting on the sidelines, with the capital sitting in our banking system that's being held hostage by regulators. If you look at all of that, and if we can unshackle that, we're going to see a lift. And then it will be an issue of managing. How do we manage that response? How do we do it without suffering the consequence of inordinate inflation? And I think you want to have somebody who's got the wisdom, the maturity, and the experience that gets it.
Well, I'm going to come back to On the Brink and the specific comparison between Obama and Romney in just a second. But looking forward, assume Romney wins, and I know my friends cringe when I start doing this, but it's important for us to start visualizing it now. He's got Governor Leavitt out running his transition team, and he'll put a lot of smart people at work, et cetera. But every force in Washington, D.C. is a force towards anti-change. Every lobbyist, every committee chairman, they're all going to want to slow it down and engage in the fundraising, engage in the cutting and papering and scissoring. How confident are you that Romney would insist upon the 100 days being a period of time in which Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, spending, defense spending, the big five are all taken care of as they could be in that first 90 days of energy?
Well, one thing, if there's anything I have confidence in, it's Mitt's leadership capability. I had this discussion with somebody at length last night, and where he was saying, Washington just doesn't change. You can't change Washington. I had a discussion with a friend of mine who basically is he took a Senate seat not long ago, and he went in to change Washington, and he's just been frustrated to no end. He said everything's got a sponsor, whether it's the president, a congressman, a senator, they have a sponsor, and no one's willing to step up and make the necessary cuts. That still being the case, I have enough confidence in the leadership capacity of Governor Romney. I have enough confidence in the resources that will be brought to bear that reason will prevail, and we will achieve what needs to be achieved in the first 100 days. I'm confident. I know people that are planning on migrating to Washington. I'm planning on going. There are a number of us that want to go and effectively take it on.
You know, what's interesting is that President Obama, when he won, he went back there and he gave the agenda over to Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. Now, he was going to be president. He was just going to enjoy it. He gave him the stimulus. It's all gone. Nothing was done. He gave him the health care bill. A nightmare erupted. He was interested in being president, not in changing things. You are confident that Romney will dig in and actually move the ball.
I'm more than confident that he will do that. He has the political will, and the capacity to affect it. And the one thing about, you talk about leadership and you talk about what Obama did in capitulating to Pelosi and Reid.
Yeah.
Obama had an agenda. His agenda was to leave, to basically abandon leadership. It was much easier to go to Saudi Arabia and bow to the king than it was to address the issue of an economic crisis in the United States. And his comment was to Nancy and to Harry, have at it. And
I'll be back in time to sign something.
Right. And they don't have the capacity to lead. That's proven by what we've seen. So he was the antithesis of leadership. He just went to the other side, deferred to somebody else because he didn't have the capacity or the competence to do what needs to be done. If there's anything you know about Mitt Romney, and you can read it, but you can know it in who he is, if there's a problem, what you do are three things. You focus, and you focus. This is a man that is committed to change.
You see, that's Truman once said famously of Eisenhower, after Eisenhower won, Ike's going to come in here and he's going to say, do this, do that, and he's going to be completely frustrated because the government won't change. And what it will require, the government will change if you come in and repeal Obamacare and you do the Medicaid, and you can do it if you do it in a hurry. The longer it takes, the need for speed. And I just don't know that anybody gets that yet. The Republicans got back there in 2010, having won in 2010, and they had their committees, and Paul Ryan went away and he did a budget, and nothing really got cut, and we got a blueprint, and we have 1/2 of 1/3 of the government. It just immediately got jelloed out. And you don't think that's going to happen?
Well, it's interesting. I've had a couple of conversations with those who are in the legislature, on the congressional side and on the senatorial side. And we've had occasions to gather in the recent past. And I sat down with a few of them. I said, all right, so tell me what you are doing. I know what the president can do within his, because regulation is not under legislation. Legislation is legislation, regulation is regulation. I know what the president can do. What are you going to do to tee it up so that the moment Mitt Romney takes his hand off the Bible, you act? You're prepared. You've got legislation to repeal. You've got legislation to do the things that are necessary to get rid of Dodd-Frank, to basically dismantle the legislation.
The Obama years.
The Obama era, as I call it. And what are you prepared to do? And 201, they said, we're preparing those moments. And I said, you better.
Gosh, I hope you're right. Let's go back to On the Brink. Probably people will remember that you, by the way, you're not a birther. I love the fact that on page 32, Barack Hussein Obama was born in Hawaii. You're not bothered by any of the kind of fringe stuff, although you point out the vetting that he received. Well, there was no vetting.
There wasn't.
And we still don't know lots of interesting things about him. The David Marinis book has filled in some gaps, but he still doesn't know a lot about him.
Right.
And we know that he's a serial fabricator in his book, Dreams from My Father, and we know, whether you have seen Dinesh D'Souza's new movie 2016 or you cite his book Roots of Rage, and I like Stanley Kurtz's book Radical Son. There are lots of interesting things about the president, but we just put that all aside. You're not really doing that here. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about you're focused on how he just didn't have any of the inputs you need to succeed as a leader.
Right.
I'll be right back. David Parker's new book, On the Brink, America's Choice 2012, available at Amazon.com, linked at HughHewitt.com. Stay tuned. 34 minutes after the hour, America's Hugh Hewitt coming up next hour. Brad Thor, novelist extraordinaire. This hour, though, David Parker is my guest on this beautiful Thursday. On the Brink is his new book, America's Choice 2012. It's available at Amazon. It's linked at HughHewitt.com, and OnTheBrink2012.com is its website. David Parker, I'm going to come back to the comparison in the Matrix, but very quickly, I did not know. And I wrote the bio, so I'm always amazed when I learn something new. I did not know that Mitt Romney left all of his father's estate to BYU.
That's correct.
How did I miss that is number one. Probably Romney didn't tell me because he's not Mr. Self-Promotion. How did you figure that someone in the family tipped that to you?
It's known. It's not publicly. It's not something that people talk about publicly. In fact, they all perceive, well, this is a guy whose father was the chairman of American Motors and left a great estate, and that's how he got a start. And for those that know Mitt, no, he didn't. He gave that away, and what he's earned, he's earned. Yeah,
the part about the basement apartment and the early challenges that he and Ann faced with young kids, I've got all that. I knew that, but I did not know that the money that George Romney left, however much it was to Mitt Romney, went to BYU, and that's really an amazing act of generosity.
Right. It's the George Romney Institute. It's the Public Management Institute. So.
Okay. I also did not know even though in my 2007 book, I said, look, he served as the bishop of his local LDS church, and he served as the ward president, the stake president, bishop of the ward and stake president. But in the former case, it was 5 years. In the second case, it was as 8 years.
Right.
It's 13 years, and an LDS leadership post is not a couple of hours a week like a Presbyterian elder or a Catholic parish council.
No, in fact, if you're serving as a bishop in the LDS church or as a stake president in the LDS church, you're spending no fewer than 20 to 40 hours a week, and sometimes more, tending to the temporal and spiritual needs of those whom you are called to serve.
So how did he do that?
You just do it.
Have you been one of those jobs?
I've served as a bishop in the LDS church.
And so how much time did that take you? Say 20 to 40 hours?
I would say it would probably was 30 to 40 on average, and sometimes I would be 60 in a week, and you just subordinate everything else to meet the needs of others. One
of the things I wrote in A Mormon in the White House is that job, given what you have to do, counsel people in trouble. That's what I explained it to people. That's really, you're like the fireman. People's houses and lives are on fire, and they go see the bishop of the ward and say, help me out, or they go see the president of the stake. What's that do to your perception of the world and of reality? Because when people tell me that Mitt Romney isn't in touch, you can't work among the people in your congregation who are most down and out and not be in touch.
I think that's a fair statement, a very fair statement. And in fact, you gain great empathy for those who you are called to serve, and you understand the plights that they face. Now, we're talking about single moms, single dads, losing a child, losing a family with illness, economic disaster, and it runs the gamut.
Kids with drug problems, kids who've run away from home.
You're dealing with kids who have chosen an alternate lifestyle. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of things that are ordinary and commonplace in America, and you're down in the very grassroots. You cannot be immersed in that and not be touched by it. By the same token, you don't promote. You're not doing it for self-promotion. You're doing it because you care. You're doing it because it is they are a part of your life, and you are a part of theirs. I can assure you that I have received letters that recently from people that we were involved with years ago, who are grateful that we have the relationship we have, and it's not something you promote for your own gain. It's something you do because you really care.
In a Roman Catholic parish or a Presbyterian church, when a terrible, grievous loss occurs, say a child is killed in an automobile accident, it's the pastor, the professional, that goes to tend to the family. I was just talking with the Bishop of Denver, who was, of course, involved in the aftermath of the horrific Aurora shooting. Does the bishop do that in a Mormon ward? If someone loses a kid, is it the bishop that shows up and superintends and helps?
In every respect. In every respect.
I didn't ask Romney that. I wish I had another interview. That would be interesting to know what kind of particular crises they have. And is there a confession role that, say, a priest has in a Catholic church for a bishop?
Well, in a sense, in the LDS church, only the Savior can forgive or has the responsibility or the authority to absolve. So a bishop helps a person become reconciled with their Savior. That's what he does. In a situation where you have a husband or a wife or a child that's been lost, that has died or passed through the veil of life, you're there to render comfort in every respect.
That's a fascinating background. I don't know of an American president who actually has that on their resume. I have to go back and think through it. Maybe Woodrow Wilson may have served in a pastoral capacity. I'm not sure. We come back, though. I want to talk about the leadership matrix. Probably the heart and soul of On the Brink is on pages 47 to 8. We'll tell you about it when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Don't go anywhere. 44 minutes after the hour, Americans, Hugh Hewitt. I am joined in studio by David Parker, whose new book, On the Brink, America's Choice 2012, is available at Amazon.com. I've linked it at HughHewitt.com. It's also at the website On the Brink 2012. Comprehensive, short, readable, a comparison between President Obama, Governor Romney, a statement concise as only an entrepreneur and an investor and very successful one could make it, as well as key appendices, which I'll come to. But the heart of it is the matrix, pages 47 and 48. First time you were on the show, David Parker, I believe we were talking about this, which was posted at MittRomneyCentral.com. Tell people what you put together here and what it shows.
Well, what I was trying to, and I did this for my own personal interest, was to try and understand what's the depth of experience of these individuals? If there's anything we elected in 2008, it wasn't experience.
It was not experience.
It was not experience. And I think everyone can agree to that point at this point. So I really wanted to do a comparative to determine what are the key elements that define a leader, that define somebody who's capable of leading and has a depth of and a wealth of experience. And so I broke it down from private sector experience to public sector experience to philanthropic experience to who we associate with, what our knowledge and capacity is. And one of the key elements of any leader is being decisive, and whether they are or aren't, and trying to compare between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. It's not a difficult comparison because it's pretty stark. It's pretty
But it's very
distinct.
fair. I want to read down. I'm going to read the whole list here. Served as a CEO, successfully led organization greater than 1,000 employees, successfully led organization with market value greater than $1 billion, proven competence, facilitated 100,000 jobs, created $1 billion in shareholder value, created wealth for thousands of individuals, international business experience, public government sector, served as CEO of a public enterprise, employee base greater than 100,000, proven competence, public service, military, legislative. By the way, you note here, Romney doesn't have this. Obama did.
Right.
And so you're very fair as you walk through these things. You have a no and a yes in that case. Reduce debt and burden on society. Cut spending. Balanced budget. Responsible for a budget greater than $5 billion. Philanthropy. Served as chairman, CEO of a philanthropic enterprise. More than 10 years of service to others. Led organization with budget greater than $1 billion. Ethics and integrity. Absence of ethics violations. Knowledge and intelligence. I love this. Advanced education credentials. You write yes, yes. They both have them.
Right.
Academic performance, top of class. Romney, yes. He was the valedictorian at BYU, I believe.
He was.
And very top of the class at HBS. Not so at the law school. Took the double degree. He only had a 3.0 or something like that at Harvard Law. And we don't know about President Obama.
Right.
What's it tell you that we don't know, David? We'll speculate a little bit. That we don't know tells us something.
It's frightening. Not only that we don't know, but it's actually, the media can find anything out they choose to find out. They do all the time. Celebrities, whoever they are, they dig up all the dirt, right? Interestingly enough, as I was doing this book, I was looking at Obama and I was looking at Romney, I was looking at available data. With Romney, you can get anything you want, anywhere, any place, anytime.
Yeah.
With Obama, man, there's nothing there.
Here's my only experience. Whenever I look for a job now I don't look for a job anymore. On my resume, it said Michigan Law School, magna cum laude, order of the coif, which means top 10% and highest honors. Not summa, but pretty high. And then at Harvard, it said cum laude within the government major because they were staples. They told someone so. I worked pretty hard, pretty smart guy in my grades. There's nothing for that for President Obama.
No.
Which usually means, if I'm reading resumes for people who want to come to work at my law firm, it usually means they haven't got it. Right?
Right.
That's you. Okay.
Otherwise, they'd be promoting it.
Yeah. Otherwise,
right.
you sell yourself, and we don't know that. So draw your own. But then you go to economic policies on the back. You have the political differences, fidelity and integrity, educational policies in the government, from judgment ability. This is not close, David Parker.
No, there's a distinct chasm between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama in key elements that matter of leadership and dynamics to carry a country forward.
Now, I know why union leaders and I know why special interest groups will support President Obama's reelection, but there are some business people that support him, like Warren Buffett. What are they thinking?
Oh, you got Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. I think there's a nature of guilt that people, in some cases who have been very successful, want to assuage that guilt. And they defer to the extremes on the other end. The pendulum swings to the other end, and it's almost an absolution of their sense of what they've accomplished in life. It's compensation for making up for their success.
Do they believe that the United States is literally too big to fail, that therefore we can't possibly stumble because our economy is so vast?
Well, you make an interesting point, Hugh. Mitt made this comment the other day. No one is going to rescue America. If you think about it, when we stumble, there isn't another country in the world that is going to step in and help America. Greece stumbles, Europe helps them solve the problem. If America stumbles, the world isn't going to come to our aid to lift us up. We're too big in that respect. We are the biggest economy in the world, and there isn't anybody out there that can pick us up.
So are there some people at the investor class that just believe that there's no way you can hurt the country? That it doesn't matter how many weapons we have. It doesn't matter what our internal rate of inflation. It doesn't matter because we're just too doggone big.
I don't think anybody's that blind. And it isn't true. We can stumble, and in fact we have. And just look around us and look how people perceive us today, and where, notwithstanding as strong as we are as an economy, we're still struggling and still stumbling in a big way, and it's impacting the rest of the world as the world is impacting us.
One last question. We go to the last segment. Personal character. People can judge President Obama all they want. They know everything they want. The inputs are there. They can decide whether he's been honest, whether he's been polemical, whether he has been nonpartisan. I think he's the most partisan figure who's been in the White House in modern times, and ruthlessly so. Unnecessarily abusive of people like Paul Ryan and people who oppose him. What about Mitt Romney and working? A lot of Republicans don't want to hear this. They want to hear that we'll work with the other side. But in reality, you got to work with the other side if you want 60 votes on social programs. What do you think about his ability to come out of a campaign and sit down and get stuff done?
Just a couple of points. One, Mitt has a core principled values that drive him. It's who he is. He's lived it all his life. It's a reflection in who he is. That he has. Secondly, he's a pragmatist, and he realizes he's got to get things done.
Final segment coming up. On the Brink is the book, a comprehensive comparison of Obama and Romney, America's Choice in 2012. It's linked to HughHewitt.com, or you can go to onthebrink2012.com. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. 55 minutes after the hour, America. If you're intrigued by my conversation this hour with David Parker, the book On the Brink, America's Choice 2012, is linked at HughHewitt.com. David Parker, quick question. The appendices that you included, Romney's commencement speech at Liberty University, some of the speeches that he gave on the occasion of winning a primary here or there, Mark DeMoss's introduction of him, a variety of various things that you put in there. What was your means of selection? Why did you do it?
I did it because the media doesn't really define who Mitt is. Well, they try to define who Mitt is and and really define him as who he's not. And so I thought it would be well to at least provide personal anecdotal information about who Mitt is by those who know him and know him best, who have had experiences with him, so that you can see that the speeches that he's given are all Mitt. They're 100% Mitt. This is a guy that doesn't have big speech writers. This is a guy who writes his own stuff. This is a guy who wrote his own book. He didn't have a ghostwriter help him write it. He wrote it. It is to the essence the nature of Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. And so I thought bringing out these anecdotal pieces from people who know him best would offer good insight to help people have something they can grab hold of and say, oh, I get that.
It's very easy. I think every journalist ought to have this with them as they move around on the Brink. Last question, the 9/11 question. On 9/11, George Bush rallied the country, got up on the top of the burned-out fire truck, and he said, people who did this will hear from us pretty soon. Any doubt in your mind that Romney can face that kind of crisis in that kind of way?
Without any question. Without any question. Because although that is a seminal event that hopefully none of us ever have to face, Mitt has dealt with crisis all his life, whether in his lay leadership in his faith, or whether in business, or whether in philanthropy. If you take what he did in the Olympics, I mean, just think about this. People forget. The Olympics were in 2002. 4 months after 9/11. And there was a cry to cancel the Olympics because of that event. And yet he felt it would be a healing experience. I had a long conversation with Fraser Bullock just the other day about this very issue and what it took to pull something like that off.
Fraser Bullock being?
Fraser Bullock, formerly the chief operating officer and second in command in the Salt Lake Olympics. And former partner with Mitt in Bain.
And said would not go, he would not yield, he would not flinch, and wanted this thing done.
Exactly right.
So, bottom line, is he going to win?
I do believe he's going to win.
And by a little or by a lot?
No, people have asked me that, and I've some good friends of mine who are very dear friends of Mitt's have said 1 to 2. I personally believe 4 to 5 on the popular vote. I think on the Electoral College, I think he pushes 300.
You think he wins Michigan?
I think he can win Michigan.
Pennsylvania?
that one's close, but it's a pretty good shot.
I agree with you on pretty much everything. David Parker, probably why I liked On the Brink so much. On the Brink, America's Choice 2012 by David Parker. We'll check in again during the campaign. Thank you, David. Coming back with Brad Thor, America. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.